I had just finished a long, exhausting day at work and stopped at a restaurant, hoping for nothing more than a quiet meal before heading home. I sat down, opened the menu, and raised my hand to ask for a glass of water. But the second the waitress walked toward my table, I stopped breathing. My entire body went cold. Standing right in front of me was my daughter-in-law, Emily. The same Emily my son had told the entire family disappeared months ago. But what terrified me even more was the fact that she was 8 months pregnant. Her hands were trembling. Tears rolled down her face. She leaned toward me and whispered words I never expected to hear. "Please don't tell your son I'm alive." For several seconds, I couldn't move. I just stared at her face, trying to understand what I was seeing. It was impossible. I had watched my son bury his head in his hands when Emily supposedly disappeared. I had seen him tell the entire family that she had abandoned him. I had spent months believing that something terrible had happened to her. Yet here she was, standing in front of me, alive, frightened, and carrying a child. I whispered her name. "Emily." She immediately looked around the restaurant and put a finger against her lips. "Please," she whispered again. "Not here." She quickly turned and walked toward the kitchen. I followed her without asking another question. She led me through a narrow hallway and into a small storage room at the back of the restaurant. The moment the door closed, Emily covered her face and started crying. I stood there completely confused. "What happened to you?" I asked. "Where have you been all these months?" She looked at me with tears running down her cheeks. "Hiding." "From who?" I asked. She took a deep breath and whispered, "From your son." My heart sank. "Daniel." She nodded. "Your son told everyone I left him. He told everyone I was cheating. He told them I stole money and disappeared. But none of that is true." I stared at her. "Then what happened?" Emily looked down at her pregnant stomach. "Daniel wanted me gone." I felt anger rising inside me, but I tried to stay calm. "What do you mean?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black flash drive. "Everything you need to know is on this." I took it from her. "What's on it?" "Proof," she said. "Proof that your son has been lying to you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son was the person I had trusted more than anyone in this world. I had helped him start his business. I had given him money when he needed it. I had stood beside him through every difficult moment. And now my daughter-in-law was telling me he had been hiding something from me. "Tell me everything," I said. Emily wiped her tears and finally began talking. She told me that months before she disappeared, she had noticed strange transactions in Daniel's company. Large amounts of money were being transferred into accounts she didn't recognize. At first, she thought it was some kind of business expense. But then she noticed the same pattern happening again and again. She confronted Daniel, but he became defensive. He told her to stop asking questions. That only made her more suspicious. She started looking through old financial records and discovered that the money wasn't going to suppliers or business partners. It was going to another company. A company that didn't officially appear to have any connection to Daniel. But when Emily investigated further, she discovered something shocking. The company was connected to my younger brother, Richard. My own brother. The man I had trusted for years. The man who had always told me that family was everything. Emily said she confronted Daniel again. This time, he didn't deny it. He told her that they were only borrowing the money and would put it back later. But Emily knew something wasn't right. Then she discovered something even worse. Daniel and Richard had been preparing documents that would make it look like I had voluntarily transferred my ownership in the company to Daniel. They wanted complete control. They wanted my money, my property, and everything I had spent my entire life building. When Emily found out, she threatened to tell me. That's when everything changed. Daniel started threatening her. He told her nobody would believe her. He told her that if she destroyed his future, he would make sure she regretted it. Then Emily told me about the night she disappeared. Daniel had taken her to an old house outside the city, telling her that they needed to talk privately. But when she arrived, Richard was already there. Emily immediately knew something was wrong. She secretly turned on the recording app on her phone and placed it inside her bag. Daniel and Richard started talking about the company, the money, and my shares. They thought Emily was completely trapped. They talked openly because they believed there was no way she could escape. Daniel said that if Emily disappeared, everyone would assume she had simply left him. He said that people would believe the story because he would tell everyone she had been cheating. Emily listened in horror. Then she realized they were planning to make her disappearance look voluntary. She was terrified, especially because she was already pregnant. She begged Daniel to let her go. He refused. He told her that the pregnancy would make everything more complicated and demanded that she get rid of the baby. Emily refused. She told him that no matter what happened, she would protect her child. That decision saved her life. Later that night, Richard left the room to make a phone call. Daniel went outside for a few minutes. Emily saw her opportunity. She grabbed her phone and ran. She ran down the road until she found a small medical clinic. A doctor there helped her. She contacted an old friend who had once promised to help her if she ever needed it. From that night forward, Emily disappeared completely. She changed her phone number, stopped using social media, and found temporary work wherever she could. She had been working at the restaurant for 3 weeks when I accidentally walked through the door. "I never planned to see you," she told me. "I was afraid that if I contacted your family, Daniel would find me." I looked at the flash drive in my hand. "Then why give this to me?" She looked directly into my eyes. "Because I can't do this alone anymore." Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "And there's something else you need to know." "What?" I asked. "Daniel isn't the one controlling everything." I stared at her. "Then who is?" She hesitated before answering. "Richard. My own brother." I couldn't speak. For years, Richard had been the person I trusted most. After my wife died, he had been the one who checked on me. He had eaten dinner at my house. He had helped me with my business. He had even attended Daniel's wedding and welcomed Emily into the family. How could he have been secretly working against me? Emily told me there was one more piece of evidence. She said there was a safe in my old office that Daniel and Richard didn't know she knew about. "What's inside?" I asked. "Something that can prove everything." That same night, I drove to my old office. The building was almost completely empty. I walked through the dark hallway and entered my former room. I opened the old safe using the combination I had used for years. Inside were property documents, old contracts, bank statements, and several envelopes. But one envelope immediately caught my attention. My name was written across the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it and found copies of bank statements. Money had been transferred out of the company account over and over again. The amounts were enormous. But the most shocking part was where the money had gone. Every transfer eventually led back to an account connected to Richard. I sat down in my chair and stared at the papers. I felt betrayed, angry, and completely humiliated. Then I found a handwritten note at the bottom of the envelope. It said, "Don't trust Daniel. He's not the one controlling this." I read those words again and again. If Daniel wasn't controlling everything, then Richard had been manipulating my son from the beginning. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Daniel. "Dad, where are you?" he asked. I stayed silent for a moment. "Why?" I finally asked. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I looked at the documents in front of me. "I'm fine." Then I decided to test him. "I've been thinking about Emily." There was a long silence. Then Daniel said something that made my entire body go cold. "Dad, Emily is dead." I hadn't told him that I had found her. I hadn't said anything about the restaurant. I hadn't even mentioned that I was looking for her. Yet somehow, the first thing he said was that she was dead. That was the moment I knew the truth. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't tell him that Emily was alive. Instead, I simply said, "You're right. Maybe it's time we stopped looking for her." Daniel sounded relieved. "Yes, Dad. That's probably best." I hung up the phone and sat there in silence. My son had just confirmed his own lie. Now I knew exactly what I had to do.
I called a lawyer the next morning. I gave him the bank statements, the property documents, and the recordings Emily had collected. Then I hired a financial investigator to examine every transaction involving the company. Within 2 days, we found something even worse. Daniel and Richard had created another company under a different name. They had been moving money there for almost a year. They had also been preparing legal documents designed to make it appear as though I had willingly given Daniel control of my shares. Their plan was simple. They would drain the company, transfer the valuable assets into their own hands, and then leave me with nothing. They thought I was too old to fight back. They thought I would trust my son no matter what he did. They thought Emily was gone forever. And most importantly, they thought I was completely unaware. That was their biggest mistake. I decided not to confront them immediately. I wanted them to believe their plan was still working. I called Daniel and told him that I wanted to meet him. He agreed. But before I met him, I made one final call. I called Emily. "I need you to trust me," I told her. "I do," she replied. "Then I need you to come back." There was silence on the phone. "You sure?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It's time to end this." We planned everything carefully. I arranged a private meeting room. Daniel believed he was coming to discuss the company with me. Richard believed the same thing. Neither of them knew Emily would be there. When Daniel entered the room, he smiled at me. Richard walked in behind him and sat down. "Dad," Daniel said, "what's this about?" I looked at both of them and calmly said, "I wanted to talk about the company." Richard smiled. "Of course. We can solve everything," I nodded. "I'm sure we can." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "So what's the problem?" I reached into my folder and placed the bank statements on the table. His smile disappeared. "What's this?" he asked. "You tell me." He looked at Richard. Richard immediately said, "These numbers don't mean anything." I placed another document on the table. "Maybe this will help." It was the record of the second company they had created. Daniel stopped breathing for a moment. Then I placed the recording device on the table. "Or maybe this will." I pressed the button. Their own voices filled the room, their conversations, their plans, their lies, everything they had said about Emily, everything they had said about my money, everything they had said about making her disappearance look real. Daniel looked terrified. Richard stood up. "This is a setup." I looked at him. "No, this is the truth." Then the door opened. Emily walked into the room. Daniel's face turned completely white. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "Emily," he whispered. She stood there silently. Richard took a step backward. I looked at my son. "You told me she was dead." He couldn't answer. "You told everyone she abandoned you." Silence. "You told me she stole money." Still nothing. "And you told me you had no idea where she was." Daniel lowered his head. I leaned forward. "But you knew exactly where she was." Daniel finally started crying. "Dad, I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Don't say you're sorry now. I made mistakes." "No," I said. "You made choices." He looked at me through his tears. "I was desperate. You were greedy. I thought I could fix everything. You could have told me the truth." He looked down at the floor. "You would have stopped me." I stared at him. "Yes, that's what a father does." He started crying harder. "Dad, please." But I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to let my anger control me. The lawyer entered the room with investigators, and the documents were handed over. Daniel and Richard finally realized that their entire plan had collapsed. They had spent months believing they were controlling the situation. They had lied to everyone. They had destroyed Emily's life. They had betrayed me. But in the end, the truth had caught up with them. The investigation continued for months. Richard was charged for his role in the financial fraud. Daniel was held responsible for the fraudulent transactions and the other crimes connected to the scheme. The company survived. My property was protected, and Emily was finally free. But the story didn't end there. 8 weeks later, Emily gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. I was standing beside her when she held the baby for the first time. She was crying, but this time they were tears of happiness. She looked at me and said, "She wouldn't be here without you." I shook my head. "She wouldn't be here without you." Then she placed the baby in my arms. I looked down at my granddaughter and felt something inside me change. For months, I had been consumed by anger. I wanted answers. I wanted justice. I wanted to know why my own son had betrayed me. But holding that little girl made me realize something. Daniel had almost destroyed his own family for money. He had thrown away the love of his father and the woman who loved him because he believed power and wealth were more important. And now he had to live with that choice. A few months later, I received a letter from him. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask me to save him. He simply wrote that he was sorry. He said he finally understood what he had done. He said he wished he could go back to the day when everything began. I read the letter several times. Then I put it away. I didn't hate him, but forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. It simply meant I refused to let his actions control the rest of my life. Years later, I still remember that restaurant. I remember sitting there after a long day at work, thinking I was about to have an ordinary dinner. I remember looking up and seeing Emily standing in front of me, 8 months pregnant, shaking with fear. I remember the words she whispered. "Please don't tell your son I'm alive." At the time, I thought those words were the beginning of a revenge story, but they weren't. They were the beginning of a fight for the truth. And I learned something that night that I will never forget. Sometimes the people closest to you can hide the darkest secrets. Sometimes the person you trust the most can be the person who hurts you the deepest. And sometimes when someone betrays you, your first instinct is to fight back with anger. But anger can make you careless. Patience makes you powerful. I didn't destroy Daniel. I didn't destroy Richard. Their own choices destroyed them. All I did was bring the truth into the light. And that is something everyone should remember. If someone betrays you, don't become the person they expect you to become. Don't let revenge consume your life. Don't destroy yourself trying to make someone else suffer. Protect yourself. Stay calm. Gather the truth. And when the right moment comes, let the truth speak for itself. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't watching your enemy fall. Sometimes it's simply standing there, completely calm, while they realize that every lie they told has finally caught up with them. And sometimes the person they thought they had defeated is the very person who comes back to expose everything. Emily thought she had lost her family. I thought I had lost my son. But in the end, we both discovered something more important than revenge. We discovered the truth. And sometimes the truth is the most powerful revenge of all.